The most exhilarating and unsettling day of my life began with an unexpected encounter with my stepsister, Elena. It was a Thursday afternoon, and the house was eerily still, the only sound being the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. I had been home alone, aimlessly flipping through television channels, trying to quell the boredom that had settled over me like a thick fog. My father and his wife, Catherine, were out for the day, attending to errands or whatever it was they did when they vanished into the world together. Their absence left Elena and me alone in the house, a prospect that usually filled me with a sense of peaceful solitude. Lately, things had been different. Elena and I had never been close, although we were roughly the same age. Our personalities were polar opposites. She was organized and meticulous, always with a plan, while I preferred a more laid-back, spontaneous approach to life. Our interactions were limited to polite greetings and cursory exchanges, a comfortable distance maintained between us. However, over the past few weeks, I had noticed a shift in her demeanor. Her eyes would linger on me a moment too long. Her presence was constant in whatever room I occupied, always a little too close for comfort. It was subtle, nothing overt, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that an unspoken current flowed between us. That afternoon, I was in the kitchen, scrolling through my phone. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room. I tried to ignore the strange energy that seemed to permeate the air whenever Elena was near. She had been in her room all day, or so I thought. When I heard footsteps behind me, I knew she was about to make her presence known. "Hey!" Elena's voice broke the silence as she entered the kitchen. I looked up from my phone, my heart skipping a beat as I saw her standing in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest. She appeared relaxed, yet there was something in her eyes, a spark of something that made my pulse quicken. "Hey," I replied casually, trying to maintain my composure. "What's up?" She shrugged, walking further into the kitchen, her gaze never leaving mine. "Not much. Just felt like coming downstairs. It's pretty quiet in here." "Yeah, it is," I agreed, setting my phone down on the table. "Catherine and Dad won't be back for a while." Elena glanced at the clock, then back at me, a playful smile curving her lips. "I know," she said, her voice laced with a suggestive undertone. "That's why I came down." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, a mixture of apprehension and excitement. There was something different about the way she was looking at me, a playful yet serious glint in her eyes that both intrigued and unsettled me. She walked over to the stove, grabbing a glass from the cabinet and filling it with water. She moved with deliberate grace, each step measured, as if she knew my eyes were following her every move, and they were. I couldn't help but be captivated by the way she carried herself, her hair flowing loosely over her shoulders, her lips curved into a knowing smile. "What are you doing in here all alone?" she asked, taking a sip from her glass before leaning against the counter, her gaze fixed on me. I shrugged, trying to maintain a casual demeanor. "Just bored, I guess. Killing time until they get back." She nodded, her eyes still locked with mine. "You've been acting strangely lately." Her comment caught me off guard. "Strangely? What do you mean?" Elena tilted her head, her smile widening slightly. "I don't know. You've been avoiding me." I blinked, surprised by her observation. I hadn't consciously been avoiding her, but perhaps I had been subconsciously distancing myself. The tension between us, whatever it was, had been growing, and I didn't know how to navigate it. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. She raised an eyebrow, setting her glass down on the counter. "Really? Because it feels like you are." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, unsure how to respond. The truth was, I had been keeping my distance. I didn't understand why, but something had shifted between us, and I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know if it was just me or if she felt it too. But either way, I'd been trying to ignore it. "I've just been busy," I said lamely, knowing it wasn't a convincing excuse. Elena's smile widened, and she stepped closer, her eyes gleaming with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Busy. Huh? Too busy to even talk to me. There was a playful lilt to her voice, but beneath it, I sensed something more serious. Something she wasn't saying out loud. I'm not avoiding you. Elena, I repeated, my voice quieter now, less sure of myself. She took another step closer, her body just a few feet from mine. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, the air between us crackling with unspoken energy. My pulse quickened, and I swallowed hard, trying to maintain my composure. I think you are, she said softly, her eyes searching mine. But you don't have to. I blinked, taken aback by her words. The room felt smaller now, the space between us shrinking with every passing second. Elena's presence was overwhelming, her proximity making it hard to think straight. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, but the words felt hollow. Elena stepped even closer, her face inches from mine. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, the warmth of her skin against mine. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing as I tried to process what was happening. This was my stepsister, someone I had lived with for years. But in this moment, she didn't feel like a sister. She felt like something else entirely. You don't have to pretend. Alex, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I know you feel it too. I stiffened, my breath catching in my throat as her words sank in. She was right. I had felt it, the tension, the unspoken connection that had been simmering between us for weeks. I had tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it wasn't real. But now, with her standing so close, her eyes locked on mine, there was no denying it anymore. I started, but my voice trailed off, unable to form a coherent thought. Elena's hand moved, reaching out to gently brush against my arm. The slightest touch of her hand sent a jolt of electricity through me, my pulse quickening in response. You don't have to say anything, she whispered, a knowing smile curving her lips. Just stop pretending. Before I could find my voice, Elena leaned in, her lips brushing softly against my cheek. The gesture was simple, almost innocent, yet it ignited a fire within me, setting my senses ablaze. I stood frozen, the reality of the situation crashing over me like a tidal wave. This wasn't just in my head, this unspoken tension, this undeniable connection. It was real. Elena felt it too, and there was no turning back. Her lips lingered on my cheek for a fleeting moment, a tantalizing tease that sent my heart into overdrive. I could feel the warmth of her breath against my skin, the subtle pressure of her lips, a ghost of a touch that left me yearning for more. Elena, I breathed, my voice barely audible. I didn't know what to say. A part of me wanted to pull away, to extinguish this flame before it consumed us both. But another part of me, the part one had been desperately trying to ignore, craved her closeness, yearned to explore the depths of this forbidden attraction. She didn't move away. Instead, she smiled, that soft, knowing smile that made my heart race. What? She asked innocently, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But the tension between us was undeniable, crackling in the air like static electricity. We can't, I began, but the words felt hollow, devoid of conviction. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, trying to reconcile the impropriety of the situation with the undeniable desire surging within me. This was Elena, my stepsister. This was wrong, wasn't it? Then she moved again, stepping closer, her body brushing against mine. I could feel the heat radiating from her, the softness of her touch as she reached up and placed her hand gently on my chest. My breath hitched, and a wave of emotions washed over me: confusion, excitement, fear, and a longing I couldn't quite name. Who says we can't? She murmured, her eyes locked with mine, a challenge in their depths. I swallowed hard, trying to clear my head, but it was impossible to think straight with her so close, her touch sending shivers down my spine. You know why, I said, my voice shaky and unsure. Elena's hand slid down my chest, her fingers tracing a slow, deliberate path that set my heart racing. Do I? She asked softly, her lips curving into a playful smile. Because it seems to me like you've been wanting this just as much as I have. Her words hit me like a thunderbolt. Was she right? Had I been harboring these forbidden desires all along? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a wave of guilt washing over me. But beneath the guilt, there was something else, a thrilling sense of anticipation, a realization that a part of me had been yearning for this moment without even knowing it. I began, but my voice faltered once again. Elena took another step closer, her body pressing against mine. I could feel the rapid beat of her heart against my chest, her eyes intense with a mix of desire and curiosity. It was impossible to look away. "You don't have to be afraid," she whispered, her hand sliding up to caress my neck, her thumb gently tracing my jawline. "You don't have to pretend anymore." I felt like the world was tilting on its axis, everything I knew shifting beneath my feet. This felt wrong, so incredibly wrong. Yet it also felt so right, as if we were destined to collide. "Elena, I tried again, but my voice failed me." She shook her head, silencing me with the softest of touches, her fingers gently brushing against my lips. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice steady and reassuring. "You don't have to say anything." And then, before I could protest, Elena leaned in, her lips pressing against mine in a kiss that was both tender and electrifying. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if giving me a chance to pull away. But I couldn't. Instead, I found myself kissing her back, my hands instinctively moving to her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, and a wave of heat surged through me, igniting every nerve, every sense. Elena's hands found their way into my hair, her body pressed against mine, making it hard to breathe. But I didn't want to break away. This was real. This was happening, and the forbidden thrill of it was intoxicating. When we finally parted, breathless, our foreheads resting against each other, the world seemed to fade away. Time stood still, and nothing else mattered but the two of us, caught in a moment neither of us had anticipated. "What just happened?" I whispered, my voice shaky with disbelief. Elena smiled, a soft, mischievous smile that made my heart race. "What does it feel like?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. I swallowed hard, my mind still reeling. I didn't know how to answer. It felt like everything had shifted, like the tension that had been simmering between us had finally boiled over. But it also felt like there was no going back, no way to undo what had just transpired. "I don't know," I admitted, my hands still resting on her waist. "But we can't do this." "Elena," her smile faltered, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at me with an intensity that made my heart pound. "Why not?" she asked softly. "Why can't we?" Her words sent a jolt of confusion and excitement through me. This was wrong. It had to be. But the way she looked at me, the way she had kissed me, made everything feel so real, so undeniable. "I mean, you're my stepsister," I said weakly, the words feeling more like an excuse than a valid reason. Elena raised an eyebrow, her smile returning. "So what?" she asked, her voice soft but insistent. "We're not related by blood. We're just two people. You don't have to let that stop you." Her logic made my head spin. Technically, she was right. We weren't blood relatives, only connected by our parents' marriage. Yet the weight of that connection still felt heavy, a shadow hanging over us. But what about them? What about Dad and Catherine? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elena's smile faded, and she sighed softly, stepping back slightly to create a little space between us. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice quiet. "But I know that I don't want to pretend like nothing's happening between us anymore." Her words hit me hard, and a wave of emotion surged through me: guilt, confusion, and something deeper, something I wasn't ready to name. She was right. We couldn't keep pretending. The tension between us had been growing for too long, and now that it had surfaced, there was no going back. But what were we supposed to do now? "I don't know if we can just ignore this," I said, my mind still reeling. Elena nodded, her eyes softening. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. she said gently. "We can take it one step at a time." Her words brought a strange sense of calm to the storm raging inside me. She was right. We didn't have to have all the answers right away. We just had to be honest with ourselves and each other about what was happening. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest begin to ease. "Okay," I said softly, "one step at a time." Elena smiled a genuine smile this time, and the sight of it made my heart swell. "We'll figure it out," she said quietly. "Together." And in that moment, I believed her. But the story was far from over. The days following that charged encounter in the kitchen passed in a haze of anticipation and apprehension. The tension between Elena and me only intensified, fueled by the memory of our forbidden kiss and the undeniable shift in our relationship. We tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, to pretend that nothing had changed. But it was a futile effort. Every time we were in the same room, the air crackled with unspoken desires. Every accidental touch sent shivers down my spine. I could see the same intensity reflected in Elena's eyes, a magnetic pull that drew us closer despite the inherent danger of our connection. One evening, about a week later, I found myself restlessly perched on the living room couch, attempting to focus on the television screen. But my thoughts were a whirlwind of forbidden fantasies. I could hear Elena moving about in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes and the soft closing of cabinet doors, a symphony of domesticity that did little to soothe my restless mind. My father and Catherine were out for the evening, leaving the house eerily quiet, the silence amplifying the turmoil within me. I couldn't escape the memory of Elena the way she had looked at me, the feel of her lips against mine, the lingering warmth of her touch. Every moment alone with her was charged with palpable tension, a forbidden allure that grew stronger with each passing day. Just as I was about to retreat to the solitude of my room, Elena emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She paused in the doorway, her eyes meeting mine, and a shiver of anticipation ran down my spine. "Are you all right?" "Alex," she asked, her voice soft yet laced with an undercurrent of concern. I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Yeah, just thinking." She walked into the living room, tossing the dish towel onto a nearby chair before settling on the edge of the couch a few feet away. The air between us crackled with unspoken desires, my heart pounding in my chest. "What about?" she inquired, her eyes searching mine. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. The truth was, my thoughts had been consumed by her bias ever since that night in the kitchen, but I didn't know how to articulate those feelings, how to confront the reality of our forbidden connection. Just everything. I finally managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Elena nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Yeah, me too." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. I could feel the magnetic pull between us, drawing us closer with an irresistible force. I knew that if I didn't leave that very instant, we would cross another linea boundary I wasn't sure I was ready to breach. But my body defied my better judgment. I found myself leaning toward her, drawn in by an invisible force I couldn't resist. Elena didn't pull away, her eyes softening, mirroring the desire I saw reflected in my own. "We said we'd take it slow," I murmured, my voice shaky with anticipation. Elena smiled a knowing smile that sent my heart racing. "We are taking it slow," she replied softly. "But that doesn't mean we have to ignore what's happening." Her words ignited a spark within me, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Elena met me halfway, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was soft and tentative, just like the first time. But this time, there was no hesitation, no guilt, just the two of us surrendering to the undeniable connection that had been building for weeks. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, and I felt Elena's hand slide up to caress the back of my neck, pulling me closer. My heart pounded in my chest, my skin tingling with the intensity of the moment. It was as if the world had faded away, leaving only the two of us, lost in a whirlwind of forbidden desire. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our foreheads resting against each other as we struggled to regain our composure. The world seemed to blur, and for a fleeting moment, It felt like we were the only two people in existence. We should probably stop, I said quietly, my voice a mere whisper against her lips, though the words themselves felt hollow. My hands lingered on her waist, reluctant to relinquish their hold. A soft smile played on Elena's lips as she gently caressed my cheek. "Do you truly want to stop?" she inquired, her voice a silken whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I hesitated, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. "I don't know," I confessed, my voice laced with uncertainty. I don't want to complicate things," she sighed, her forehead still resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the space between us. "I understand," she murmured, her voice laced with understanding. "But perhaps we're not complicating things. Perhaps we're simply exploring the unknown." Her words resonated within me, a spark of truth igniting amidst the confusion. This didn't feel like a mistake, a transgression against the sanctity of our family bond. It felt like an awakening, a discovery of a connection that had been lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to blossom. "I don't know what we're supposed to do," I admitted, my voice barely audible. A confession whispered against her lips. Elena leaned closer, her eyes locking with mine, a silent promise reflected in their depths. "But I know," she whispered, and before I could utter another word, she captured my lips in a passionate kiss. It was a kiss that unleashed a torrent of emotions, a release of all the pent-up longing we had both been harboring. We surrendered to the moment, our bodies entwined, our souls connecting in a dance of forbidden desire. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and liberating all at once. The intensity of our emotions consumed us, and before I knew it, the moment had passed, but Elena didn't seem to mind. It was a shared experience, a silent acknowledgement of the undeniable connection that bound us together. As she pulled away, a mischievous smile played on her lips. "We'll figure it out," she promised before disappearing up the stairs, leaving me breathless and yearning for more. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. We had crossed a threshold, ventured into uncharted territory, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were a surreal blend of normalcy and heightened awareness. Every glance, every touch, every shared moment was charged with an unspoken intensity. We didn't discuss what had happened, but the connection between us was palpable, an invisible thread weaving its way through our every interaction. I tried to maintain my usual routine, but the world seemed different, sharper, more vibrant. I was acutely aware of Elena's presence, her every move, her every breath. The air crackled with unspoken desires, making each encounter a delicate dance of anticipation and apprehension. One evening, about a week later, we found ourselves alone in the house once again. My father and Catherine were out for dinner, leaving us enveloped in a silence that amplified our unspoken emotions. I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to read a magazine, but my thoughts were consumed by Elena, by the memory of her kiss, by the forbidden longing that burned within me. Elena entered the kitchen, her movements graceful and deliberate. My heart quickened as she sat across from me, the dim light casting shadows across her face. Her expression was unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, her voice soft yet firm. I set the magazine aside, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been dreading this conversation, knowing it was inevitable. We couldn't keep pretending, couldn't ignore the undeniable truth that hung between us. "Yeah," I replied, my voice betraying my nervousness. "I guess we do." Elena leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table before her. She remained silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on me as if searching for the right words. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, filled with unspoken emotions. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice laced with vulnerability. "I don't know how we're supposed to act now." I nodded, swallowing hard, my mind grappling for answers. "Me neither," I admitted, the truth echoing in my words.